Thanks for tuning in to Season 4 of Strange, Rare, and Peculiar Homeopathy Podcast, where homeopathy lives, breathes, and evolves with Denise Straiges and Alastair Gray. We'll be exploring modern practice, research, and philosophy, from Hahnemann's radical insights to today's breakthroughs and discoveries. Get ready for homeopathy woes, feedback from pros, and the more you knows.
All right, folks. Hi there. My name is Alastair Gray. I am the academic director at the Academy for Homeopathy Education. Last week, the Academy for Muesli Eating. In addition to that, research director at the Institute for the Advancement of Homeopathy. I'm here with my goodly wife, Denise Straiges. Who are you?
I am both your goodly wife and Denise Straiges. And I'm the president and clinical director of the Academy of Homeopathy Education. And I do what?
And the founder.
Oh, and the founder. I mean, technically, well, yeah, I guess of HE, but we have a vestigial tail that we came from another program. So maybe, yeah.
And also
Anyway,
the founder of the IAH.
That one I'll take. The Institute for the Advancement of Homeopathy. We are an advocacy organization. We are a 501c3. And if you're not in America, that's basically our charity designation. And we are committed to the truth in homeopathy. And we get there through the provision of clinical services, and then we measure the outcomes. We've been doing that for over 10 years. We've got about 10,000 cases that we've seen since March of 2020 with the initiation of the Homeopathy Help Network. And we conduct research, outcomes-based research on all of the work that gets done in our clinic. And that means that when we come to you and we're talking about safety and best practices, we're not coming at it from, oh, and this really cool person did this really cool thing and da-da-da. We actually have an IRB that we report to. We work to the highest standard of human subject research. So in other words, when we are conducting research, we are doing it according to the highest level of rigor. I think that's really important because there's a lot of opinion out there, and there are a lot of statements being made about what homeopathy does and doesn't do. So within the Institute for the Advancement of Homeopathy, we're sort of looking at everything through the lens of anything that we say, we need to be able to back it up with facts. And so this actually, where I would like to start is with just this little thing today, Al. And our topic is sort of broad and specific at the same time because it's about best practices, which is really specific, but in the context. And so I was working on something today. I did a map of my research. And I wanted to start with this because I think you're going to riff on this because our research topics kind of overlap, right? So I have it in 3 parts, right? And so the first part is the contingent evolution of homeopathy after Hahnemann, okay? That is a little bit around sort of the institutional history and the intellectual history. And under that project is my case analysis book, but also the work that I did around, for my dissertation about Herring and Lippe and education and the trajectory forward. Yes, sir. I see you have your hand up.
Please, miss. Yeah, please, miss. What do you mean by contingent?
These two things, how they happen at the same time. So homeopathy is evolving in a few different ways, right? So on one hand, it's contingent to the evolution of science, right? So homeopathy emerges out of sort of the Enlightenment quest for a universal doctrine of healing, of medicine. And Hahnemann did that, right? Hahnemann cracks that code. He creates a system of medicine, and then he goes on into the pharmacological preparation of the substances that evolve. But what makes the conversation really interesting, and this is going to come up again when I talk about the next part, but what makes this conversation really interesting is that the evolution of homeopathy has been diluted and not succussed. In other words, it has moved away from Hahnemann's ideal and into an anything goes kind of idea, which would be fine if Hahnemann hadn't done such a great job and if he left it incomplete and with lots of holes in it, but he didn't. And so the misappropriation of his work has left us with a little bit of a mess. Anyway, and so there's the intellectual history and the institutional history. That institutional history is what dovetails into what you're working on, the education bit.
I am.
Yeah.
I am. I'm loving the summer. Summertime. I wake up in the morning, I scratch myself, the birds are singing, the sun is usually shining unless there's another thunderstorm. And I get up and have my first coffee. And then I've been basically for 3 to 4 hours every day working on this project. And look, it is evolving, not as two contingent things, but as it is evolving as an exploration of education in homeopathy. Because to me, everything can be fixed or everything can be broken by good or poor education. All of the challenges we have, all of the disorientation we have about homeopathy is about poor education. All of the opponents that complain about homeopathy from the outside, and so that I was talking about the inside there, where we're disorientated, but all of the complaints about homeopathy from the outside, also because of a poor understanding of what it is. Either way, it comes back to education, it comes back to communication. And so what I'm doing is looking at the state of play now, like scan, 360-degree scan, what's happening, and I'm doing it in two different ways. And then I'm asking the historical question, well, how the hell did that happen? And then looking at the literature, looking at the lack of any research that's gone into the education of homeopaths, looking at the books, some of the books that are there, because there are some books, not great. And then presenting my own step by step research, because I've conducted now, in this book, there's going to be eight different pieces of research which have formed my own understanding about what to do, how to do it. And so part of that is an audit of North American and then global homeopathy through hundreds of hours of mapping websites and going to professional associations and finding out that there's this college in Japan and they teach this. And, so I'm dancing all around the world. I'm establishing a problem. And then the last part of the book is the future. And the future, we've got a choice. This is an inflection point, right now. And as you said, with some of the things that we see from the perspective, folks, from the perspective we sit in, we see what's going on in homeopathy from the clinic first from the clinic. And that means
high volume, right? So, and 10,000 cases since 2020. And that's not counting our own individual practices. Those are just the ones that come in through, through our portal. So this is the canary in the coal mine situation.
Well, that's it. But that's why sometimes I think when people say, they start waving flags and going, oh, this problem, people go, well, I don't see that. Just chill. Right. It's all okay. But this is,
I think there are two.
Our hair is on fire problem that we are seeing in the clinic. And it's not the problem that we saw 20 years ago. It's nothing to do with, there's a different way of practicing homeopathy and it's called sensation method, or it's called, using the blah, blah, or the periodic table, or a different systems thinking to make a clinical decision. Because at the end of the day, a different way of getting to a result, it's just a different way of getting to a result and not really a major problem. It's not a shattering of the inductive logic that has dominated homeopathy from beginning to recent times. But what we're seeing in our coal mine, with our canaries, are the canaries have fallen off the perch because of the dramatic challenge that we're seeing. And what we're seeing are those cases, complex cases that come to see us, chronic cases, and they are either not responsive to traditional Hahnemannian homeopathy, to which you could say, you're not doing a very good job. Or we're seeing that they're not responsive to any homeopathy because of the outrageous number of homeopathic interventions, combinations, clears, all of that stuff that's going on. which is making these people sicker. We're seeing for the first time in homeopathy, and this is the reason for the noise. We are seeing people that have been made sicker by bad homeopathy. Back in the day, sorry,
this no, sorry, I just want to say people need to hear this, because willful ignorance will not make this less true. Saying it's not happening is not going to change the reality. And we are facing a point. I want to step in and say something here, because we've been talking about this, and I have people who say, oh, well, we have to be open to how anybody is doing homeopathy. I think that people need to hear what's happening. And I'm going to give 3 examples, short examples, so that if you think that we're exaggerating, this is 3 out of, I would say 8 out of every 10 cases that we see either in our teaching clinic or in our private practices have been treated before with this, whatever people call it, complex homeopathy protocols, all the stuff. And there are people who have taken not 5 remedies, not a succession of remedies over time that maybe had minimal effect, not 10 remedies, not 20 remedies, but hundreds. Sometimes they'll be taking 10 to 15 different things at one time, including multiple nosodes, multiple sarcodes, and what is being called a constitutional remedy. And then there are these products that are being marketed that have hundreds of doses being recommended a day, upwards of 600 doses of homeopathic remedies a day, many of them in X potency, many of them being various minerals for which we do not have data on the toxicological threshold for how many 10Xs of remedies you can take in a day before there is cumulative toxicity. So I want to point out, we're not saying, oh, our friend, Bunny down the street doesn't do great homeopathy and she's given 15 remedies over the course of the last year and blah, blah, blah. No,
Bunny?
That's not what we're talking about. Bunny. I don't know anybody called Bunny, so I didn't have to accidentally say something.
It's a really, really good point, because we're not saying, look, if you give a nosode every now and again, it's like, I give nosodes every now and again. It's like,
you would have to pry the Meteorinum out of my clenched fists how many times we've had unbelievable reactions to that. How many great syphilinum cases. I'm going to give an example actually around carcinosin in a minute. But I wanted to talk about a couple of cases that have crossed my path very recently. So I saw a case of a person. I'm going to do my best to just not give any identifying characteristics. It was a young person who had 3 serious diagnoses. One of them was a serious neurological issue. And when I took the case, I was asked, why are you asking so many questions about the physical symptoms? Actually, okay, I have to say what it was. It's a seizure disorder that this person has had for an extended period of time. And they said, why are you asking me these questions? Like, is it a tonic-clonic seizure? Are they seizures of absentia? What happens with the seizure? Do they come on in the day or in the evening? What medication are you taking for the seizure? What kind of reaction have you had to the medication? This person was like, what? And they had seen 3 homeopaths before and had taken a boatload of remedies. And guess what? They said that the prior homeopaths did not ask them any clarifying information about the chief complaint, did not ask about a serious neurological issue for which the person has symptoms and is medicated. So that's number 1. Guess what? When I asked clarifying questions about, I was like, well, what do you mean they didn't ask you about this? Whatever. What did you think you were going for? And basically it was a psychospiritual experience to help them do better, have better relationships and to be less shy and less of a doormat and more assertive and better boundaries and to stop playing video games. I mean, this is okay. So for the people who are wanting to deny that this is problematic, these are the types of situations that we are seeing. It's that level of egregious intervention.
Well, but let's just stick with that for a moment, because we could say that that's poor case taking, but it's a homeopath that's making an assumption. And I don't have necessarily a problem with the assumption, because the assumption is that the body or the soma is affected by the psyche, or
Sure, of course.
you know, and that's a that's the title of a book. No,
But they're not
like
exclusive. But you can't do one without the other.
yeah, exactly. But so I'm just saying that sounds like kind of poor post-Kentian kind of a homeopathic approach. But they've had a boatload. What does a boatload mean? Is that like a cocktail?
Oh, so a boatload is a little less than a butt ton, I think. So a boatload, because this wasn't the most I've seen, but there were charts. There were charts.
With
And
a
this person
spreadsheet involved?
it wasn't technically a spreadsheet, it was a table. And there were multiple remedies given every single day.
Yeah.
Multiple. Like on some days, there would be 5 or 6.
Well,
And
let's discuss this because one of the things about homeopathy, I don't know how to explain it without talking about our rock star Iris Bell. But Iris Bell is a retired professor who she was at Harvard and then went to Arizona State.
think so. I'm going to Google. I'll tell you in a second.
In one of the amazing presentations that she does, she explains how homeopathy works. And she does it using really interesting language. She calls human beings complex adaptive systems. We are a complex adaptive system with the ability to react to stimuli. And then she goes on and really eloquently describes how homeopathy works. The homeopathic remedy.
I want to read her just quick so you know who she is. She's an American psychiatrist, researcher, professor, and author, recognized for her work in integrative and alternative medicine, including studies on multiple chemical sensitivity and homeopathy. A Harvard and Stanford alumna, she is professor emeritus at the University of Arizona, has held NIH-funded research roles, and published over 140 professional papers. Her recent focus is on nanoparticle nature of homeopathic remedy and holistic approaches to chronic illness. Like she is, I call her the intermediary with the force.
Here's the homeopathic remedy. Let's call it, it's a simplex. Let's call it Pulsatilla 30. And it fits into the lock, right? It's a key, it fits into the lock. And there's a gentle twist. And then the vital force of the person starts to yield to the impression made upon it. And that's the primary action of the remedy. Then there is a rallying based on the resilience of that vital force, and the vital force starts to push back. Secondary action, or stress and strain, as others have described it. But this is the process by which there is a healing response and then a centering and a recovery of the impression made on it by a single remedy, right? That's what happens. When you're throwing the kitchen sink, or what did you say before? A boatload or a butt ton of impressions or keys. Yeah. How does an instinctual vital force yield intelligently to a boatload of impressions? It's impossible to describe. And I can only imagine the long, I was going to say it was an emotive term. The long-term impact, fallout. I was going to say catastrophe or fallout from that. I don't know that a human vital force can sustain that over a period of time. Show me. And this is the thing, folks. I can show you 200 examples of this, right? And I can show you the safety record. I can show you the outcomes, the costs, all of it, because that's what homeopathic research is on this. But if someone wants to come along and say, well, here's my research on, the use of Fibonacci that and polycrest soup that and combination this, then, sure, we'll have a read of it and look at the quality of the research. But I don't see any long-term benefits from that. Yeah.
So this is where I wanted to go through the map of research, because it all ties into, right? So, well, but I want to go back to your thing for a minute. So in case you're wondering about Al's, who is he to have this conversation? I want to say he's the world expert in this. You know how we know that? Because he's the only person that has this PhD in the intersection of learning technologies and integrative medical education. So pro tip, if you want to be the world expert in something, pick a topic no one else has thought about, and you get the crown. And actually, we are proud.
I will take that, because I remember a fateful day in 2015 when my two supervisors says, right, we now need you to do a critical integrative literature review on
Yeah.
the topic. And
And what'd you find?
when I worked out what that meant, it means you do a very, very systematic search through the literature.
Yeah.
And the number of papers that I found on digital technologies, education, and complementary medicine, there was nothing.
Zippo.
There was
Zilch.
the starting finding for my PhD was no one had ever written about it.
So you got your literature review done real quick.
I did, and then I had to redo it because they said you can't start a PhD with no literature. So then I refined my search terms, and I found 2 articles relating to homeopathy. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got this, because this map is something that I'm working on. I was looking at these as 3 separate projects, but I realized as I'm writing about them this summer that they're all interconnected. So I'll just tell you really quickly. The second thing that I'm looking at is Hahnemann's intellectual world, right? So this is seeing Hahnemann's work on its own terms, because one of the problems that we have is that much of the Hahnemannian work, going back to the original colleges, right? Herring and Lippe's schools, they didn't even have the organon and chronic diseases as primary sources on the textbook list. So it became interpolative very early on. Seeing Hahnemann on his own terms, not through altered interpretations, which includes Kent, right? The Kentian perspective on homeopathy has taken it into a completely different place. Okay, so that's number 2. And that's part of that is this idea of recovering Hahnemann on his own terms is that it allows us to look at homeopathy on its own terms. Because when you practice homeopathy according to the Hahnemannian principles, that's when it sings. That's when it's really beautiful and works. That's why, it's like what we've grown to do in a lot of homeopathy, because we haven't really, really taken on what homeopathy is and what it does. We've basically been doing the equivalent of off-label prescribing, and it's okay. And sometimes it's decent. But what Hahnemann did by creating this unbelievable framework based on universal laws is he figured out how health and healing works. I mean, basically, it's like the equivalent of Newton understanding gravity, right? So Hahnemann, he figured out the universal law. Then he had to go forward into the development of the medicinal interventions. That comes second. That was secondary because everything up until 1834 was just based on similars and not entirely in potentized or dynamized form. And so once you start to let that click, you can see how everything that has been sort of subsequent to 1834 is just an assumption about the dynamized substance. And it's built on sand because it's built on the false premise of safety, because there's this idea of the very dilute nature. People talk about ultra dilutions. Ultra dilution is a completely different thing than a homeopathic remedy. Doesn't mean that it doesn't work or have an effect, but once you start to look through the lens of what Hahnemann's intellectual discoveries were, you see that the process of the making of the medicine is so key. And the trituration is a key part of it, because these were these iatrochemical operations. So I'm going to back up and simplify this. So what happens is Hahnemann, the theory clicks, the universal theory of healing, it clicks. That's the beginning. That's like 1795. Okay. The refinements occur thereafter. And the refinements are, okay, I've got this system, this universal system of healing. Now I've got to figure out the delivery. Once you figure out the delivery, then he starts to back up and he says, oh, wait, there are nuances to the presumptions of why we deliver these medicines. And he doesn't waver other than for like 5 minutes. You can go back to a prior episode where we talk about the single remedy principle, right? We talk about that with lots of primary source material. It was an episode, we'll put it in the show notes, but it was, I think, October of 2024. Anyway,
2024?
I think it was October 2024.
My God.
Yeah. Anyway, so you know why I remember? Because we were staying at that really cool hotel in Brooklyn when it came out. Yeah. Anyway, so we've got this thing that happens, right? Hahnemann understood something that others diverged from the very beginning. Our medicine was misinterpreted. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all wrong. It just means that it's not optimal. So if we just look at it from this intellectual historical paradigm, we could take it down to something simplistic, right? So Constantine Hering, father of American homeopathy, okay? His influence, if he goes back to ancient influences, he goes straight to Paracelsus, do not pass go, do not collect $200, just straight to Paracelsus. That's it. The Paracelsian influence completely shifted things. It's got all its doctrine of signatures orientation, it's spagyrics, it's different medical formulation. But most importantly, Paracelsus leans into isopathy. And Hering takes that and he runs full bore with it. Hahnemann says, no. Hahnemann is an anti-Paracelsian. He says it. I've got quote after quote of it. Hahnemann comes from a completely different lineage. And Hahnemann's lineage is about the quest for a medicine that extends life, puts life back into an organism otherwise losing life. And Hahnemann speaks very clearly about how one does that. You prescribe the remedy according to the understanding of the totality of symptoms, one remedy, and you assess it over time. Aphorism 171. He says, do not give same for same, especially a nosode. He says, nosodes are going to give us lots of potential healing, but you need to do a proving and prescribe according to the full understanding of it. He says in the footnote to 56, as we talk about all the time, to try to cure one disease with the same disease, even in potentized form, he says, nothing will happen but exacerbation of the disease. Nothing but calamity will result. So you can see just from going this bifurcation of just one thing, and we didn't even hit on Kent, right? So when we start to look at Hahnemann, rediscovering Hahnemann and saying homeopathy started with him, and we should spend all of our time fully understanding what he brought to the table. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Point number 3. So my third project is around chronic diseases, right? So I've been working on this whole thing about autoimmunity, biomedicine, the difference between causation and results, the biomedical basis of disease versus Hahnemann's understanding in chronic diseases, their peculiar nature and their homeopathic cure, and how we, through this very nuanced process, can put life back into an organism otherwise losing life. And what he says very clearly is that, yes, there are quote unquote germs implicated in disease process. Mm-hmm. However, the physiological response to it, or the body, mind, spirit response to it, is individualized and based on susceptibility. And so what we're seeing in our research, so much of my time is spent dealing with autoimmunity and dealing with these cases, is that it's not about you need to give the remedy for this particular germ or cure this particular infection, latent or active, or inherited or potential. It's not about that. Mm-hmm. But what's happened, so let's look at it. We're going to look at it in 2 ways. Let's look at how it's happened in the medical world, and then we're going to look at the same corollary in homeopathy, because that's where you were going. This is all going to loop back to what your study is. So we just take this through the allopathic medical paradigm. One of the examples that I will often teach is during my conference presentations on bioreductionistic versus homeopathic disease understanding. And I use the example of pans and pandas, right? So if we take pandas, pediatric, autoimmune, neuropsychiatric disease with group A strep. So we take the group A strep, go back in history, The problem that the medical world understands from strep is that untreated group A strep can become an issue with the heart. You can get endocarditis, you can get, rheumatic fever that can result in endocarditis, and Sydenham's chorea. So a choreic neurological movement disorder. If you go all the way back in history, you could trace it back to the 4th century, St. Vitus stance and so forth, all the way up until we get to 1940. Penicillin comes on the scene. And so the eradication of group A strep with an antibiotic seems like it's a win because you get rid of the localized problem. And theoretically, the sequela, the secondary effects, don't happen. So you see less incidences of acute endocarditis or mitral valve issues, and you see less Sydenham's chorea as that secondary downstream effect.
Mm-hmm.
For 80 years. For 80 years, that was the trend. Okay. Now, 80 years from the beginning of, the prophylactic use or therapeutic use of penicillin or antibiotics for group A strep. Now, what we see 80 years later is Sydenham's chorea in full flower without group A strep, without the vector. They just call it PANS. They remove the group A strep. And you can read, if you're interested in this, look at the seminal articles by Sweeto et al. There are these 2 articles. The first is on pandas, the second is on PANS, and it's the removal of group A strep. And now it's the association with any of these other diseases that may cause it. Okay. Sorry, that was a...
And just for clarity, when you say Sydenham's chorea, you're saying an old medical term for what is clearly today pandas.
Oh, yeah.
Pandas.
And I'm not saying that. You go to aspire.org. I tell a lie. Aspire.care. So they are kind of the leading allopathic organization that's publishing information about PANS and pandas. And it was when I was doing some research a couple of years ago that I came across that. And that was what broke open this understanding for me.
Yes.
Okay. So now let's put that aside. Or actually, no, let's look at it through a different lens. We can say that's broken logic. And the people who love homeopathy are all get up in anybody's grills and say, oh, yeah, if you treat that with antibiotics, you're going to get, all kinds of problems down the road. Well, you can just replace the exact same. You have the same argument because what the homeopaths are now doing 80 years later is attempting to do what the allopaths did by giving this isopathic intervention for a particular pathogen and expecting a result that is not a long-term nuance thing, but rather it's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. You may have a good result seemingly for a short time, but you may be screwing, the rest of your life or the next generation.
Yeah.
Right? So this is why these overly simplistic solutions to complex problems, they're very exciting, right, in the moment, and they're terrifying in the long run. We don't have to be terrified about homeopathy when it's done on script because we have 230 years of clinical evidence that says you're not going to get harm. But we now have a growing and exponentially growing body of evidence that says when used off script in these like giant egregious ways, then who knows what's going to happen. And sometimes people think they're better for a short term and then it's like really, really bad.
Yeah. Take a breath and a deep.
Got the vapors.
Got the vapors.
Got the
You're on
vapors.
a roll. And what I take from that, because now I've heard you say that, let's say 10 times, what I'm hearing is that the approach that I'm going to just use the term, it's value laden, but it's poor homeopaths are taking, is to use an outdated allopathic model to select a homeopathically prepared substance, which is prescribed unhomeopathically. And that's the thing that really gets me, is that what happened to the first 10 lectures, the first 50 lectures of your homeopathy course? What happened to homeopathy philosophy? What happened to what we're doing is looking for something similar out there in the environment that can create the same symptoms or the similar symptoms to those that the patient's got. It's like it's just got lost in this, oh, I have this named condition, therefore you get this protocol. It's like, how on earth can you put those two things together? Because it's not even good allopathy. Good
No.
allopathic medicine today takes into consideration the terrain as well as the bug and an acknowledgement of antimicrobial resistance, because of the amount of clear, unequivocal research that's demonstrated that it's been a poor set of practices for 50 years, 80 years.
So it's interesting because you bring up something really important, because these homeopaths, the cosplay homeopaths of today, who are just using the medicines, right, but not in any way aligned with the philosophy. And I would argue Hahnemannian or other, because I don't know of any homeopaths that prescribed all of this stuff. This is new, right? So this idea, they talk about finding the root cause, but it's a misappropriation of the idea, right? Because it's like, so what's the root cause? Oh, the root cause is my grandfather had, I don't know, ear mites. Do people get ear mites? That's a dog thing, isn't it? Now my ear itches. Anyway.
Because for me, the answer is, well, it depends on your perspective, because let's say, and this is something I learned from years of dealing with anxiety and panic attacks in my clients, that there's a biological model that explains it, but there's a behavioral model that explains it, and then there's a a psychodynamic model that explains panic attacks. And if you're looking through one of those lenses, that will explain the phenomena and then help you choose whatever outcome you're gonna use. Is that what you're looking for?
No, it's different than that, but I'm not doing a good job in explaining it, so just forget. Don't worry about it.
From a homeopathic point of view, the root cause has got to be some sort of miasmatic chronic disease. That's
why I just reach for my chronic diseases, because I'm better if I talk about it through this lens of understanding. This is the language. The thing is, it is born of ignorance. So, and this is why it keeps taking me back to your research in education, because, we were talking earlier about the drawing that I do, where I've got Hahnemann in the center. So imagine this. I need to get that slide out and I can show it when we're on Zoom, but imagine you've got a circle and in the middle is Hahnemann. And then there are spokes coming off of that center hub of Hahnemann. And remember, when we're talking about Hahnemann, we're not just talking about like some old fuddy-duddy German doctor who thought, oh, there's a gentler way to do this, but rather a person who was able to create a system of medicine based on the universal laws, right? As consistent as gravity for Newton. He was able to do that and then create the therapeutic interventions that go along with it. And so when you look at it through that lens, you go, okay, I got Hahnemann in the middle, and then there are these spokes that I draw off of it. And they would be all of these thinkers that came subsequent to Hahnemann who put their own stamp on it. And so each of those spokes coming out of the central hub is pointing outward. And then, I don't know, round about the early 20th century, somebody drew a circle around the outside of it and said, anything that's included in here is homeopathy. Actually, what we should do, the subsequent slide to it all, should be Hahnemann in the middle, and the second one is a pill in the middle. It's a vial of the pills in the middle, because that's what's changed. We've moved away from reliance on the philosophical construct and just focus completely on the pill. So anyone who uses a dynamized substance is considered to be using homeopathy, when in reality, homeopathy up until 1834 didn't even require a dynamized substance. Yeah. Right? And think about this, guys, because, Hahnemann lived from 1755 to 1843. So what's that, 9 years? It was only 9 years of his, is that right? From 1834 to 1843.
That's exactly it. Sorry, that's the point of that statistic. It's that for the last 9 years of his prescribing life, when he's in his 80s, essentially, he's only using potentized substances all the time. Yeah. Dynamized attenuations.
Yeah. And so the production, that sort of, he kept going. He went deep into that. So, and this all happened after chronic diseases. Remember, chronic diseases, first publication is in 1828. So from 1828 to 1834 was the refinement. Well, he was continuing to publish chronic diseases. It came out in 5 different iterations, or what, not pamphlets. What do you call it? Not 5 editions. What's the word I'm looking for? It was 5 separate manuscripts.
5 volumes or something?
5 volumes. 5 volumes.
Yeah.
Each of which had its own introduction, except I think number 2. One of them didn't have its own introduction. Anyway, and then the 5 just become the book. So once he would have finished with the publication of chronic diseases, he then is concentrating on, well, it's coming along the same time, these intellectual discoveries around the use of potency, the use of the dynamized substance. And of course, it's in his last year, his magnum opus, the 6th edition of the Organon, which is the 50 millesimal potency. And in case you're wondering, Hahnemann did not use homochord, nor did he do Fibonacci homochord. And this idea that you just put every potency in and that the body will know which one to use is crazy town. That's like the kind of logic my kids tried to use on me when they were in high school, you know?
In what circumstance?
Oh, like, I don't know. It's just that kind of logic. It's just made up crazy talk. Oh yeah, just throw it all in and the body, the intelligence of the body knows what to do. Yeah, I'm going to say that's not actually the case.
I wouldn't mind knowing the mechanism around that. Not that we should necessarily be mechanism of action freaks, because I've heard that 100 times. And my first question is, well, how?
Right.
It's a loose metaphor. So it's summertime, and as you can tell, our mornings are really exciting because Denise is in the intellectual history of homeopathy. I'm in the historical, present, and future education worlds. I get my neck deep in taxonomy and looking at the amazing, crazy diversity that is also a challenge for us as a profession. When I say diversity, I don't mean cultural, but what I mean is that the educational offerings, it's at straight up university level in India, in Brazil, in Argentina, in South Africa, and Pakistan. And it's totally Wild West private colleges in the United States, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the UK. And then you've got the other nuances of the naturopathic schools that are offering some homeopathy. And then, above all, then it's about what homeopathy, because, these people, like you just said something about homochords, they've been around for 12 years. They've been used for 12 years. 12 years is not 230 years. And it's not.
Yeah, it most certainly is not.
Yeah.
And
can
I use a case example on something?
Sure.
Because, sorry, slightly diverting here, but it's adjacent to this idea of give all the potencies and it's just going to work, because people are also giving all the remedies because they can, I suppose. So I had a case. I teach this case in semester 3. It's when I teach the block on Lyme disease. And I have 2 cases that I teach. One of them that was treated by one of these protocol crazies, and the case went fully off the rails. And the example that I use, this child wound up with severe neurological effects after a combination of bad homeopathy and a couple of other interventions, like a Rife machine and something else. Okay, so there's that. And then there's a case of Lyme fully resolved over time. And what's interesting about this case is I inherited this case from a colleague who's an amazing homeopath who was basically taking a sabbatical. And so I was covering all of her cases. And so this woman, who my colleague had seen for years, she presented with a recurrence of symptoms, exhaustion, whatever, that was a part of her Lyme case. Anyway, so I I treated her, and actually I still work with her, and this is since 2012. So it's 14. So I have 14 years of follow-up here. And what was really interesting was that at a certain point in her case, I gave her carcinosin.
Mhm.
And the whole case opened up at that point.
Mhm.
Now, the reason I say that I'm bringing this up is because I didn't have her chart from before, because this was in the days of paper files. I didn't have all of them, whatever. So I go along and da-da-da. So I reach out to my colleague, and I'm giving her an update on this case. And I said, oh, she just had a great result from carcinosin. And she said, wait a second, I feel like I gave that to her at some point. And she went back through the file, and she had given it a couple of years before, and it was a dud. It didn't do anything. And so I think that this is really important, because homeopathy is the right remedy at the right time in the best potency that you can find. Not every potency, not every remedy and every potency scattershot in hope that something does something or whatever. But you see that with this nuanced prescribing, when you, like you said about Iris Bell, when you get the right energetic pattern and the key gets into the lock, then this next level of healing can happen. And like we see this when we're giving remedies in certain potencies. Sometimes, we'll talk about, oh, a person's going from one level to the next level in LM, and they have a shakeup. And you go, oh, go back to the last one. And they ride it for longer until they're ready to go to the next potency. Right. And so for folks who are maybe listening to this, I mean, it's hard to imagine that there are people who aren't into really into homeopathy listening to this, because it's kind of insider baseball. But the homeopathy as a medical modality, it does have laws. It's not a free for all. And and sometimes you can get good results from some of the peripheral ways of looking at it. But I think that just knowing what we do and knowing the potential risk it feels really important. Don't you think?
Well, I do. I've listened to you today a couple of times say, and use that offhand term that homeopathy is safe. And I used to believe that, and now I don't. And one of the reasons I don't actually say that or believe it anymore is because of a couple of research papers that I read that suggest that up to 25% of studies and up to 25% of cases have some reaction, some aggravation. And so what I'm thinking is that you're completely right, that you can't guess with this. We're dealing with sick folks. You're dealing with sick kids. We don't have a lot of space for maneuvering. Homeopathy is forgiving. The simillimum is, I like that term, forgiving, but
Yeah.
not with a lazy, overconfident prescribing full of hubris and look at me and now I'm going to announce my amazing one case to my following on Instagram. It's just like it's well, apart from the fact it's just embarrassing. It's
mortifying. It is mortifying.
It is actually. It's
I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed to be a homeopath if people think I do what some of these people are doing. It's insane. But I'm going to read a testimonial that we would have done at the end, but it's exactly related to what we're talking about. And it says, quote, the discussion on potency and retaking a remedy was very enlightening for me. I've been receiving care from a classically trained homeopath for about half a year, and listening to you read from the Organon about dosing explained a lot of the setbacks I've been having. My family's had experience with several homeopaths over the last few months, trying to find one trustworthy and effective. I'm really sorry. And I've been most impressed with the professionalism and knowledge of the help we've received from a graduate from your school through HHN. I have been blown away by the vast, all caps, difference between their practice of homeopathy and even others who have practiced for years. I've become impassioned for the practice of quality professional homeopathy as a result of seeing the difference with my own eyes. Thank you for the service and zeal you bring to the profession. Oh my God.
zeal.
Can I make the heart thing happen? Yeah, there we go.
Look at that. Yay. All the hearts.
Really lovely. And I really appreciate that because because it's tough. It's tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I want to wrap up. Do you know why?
Because it's time.
Well, because I got an email saying that our hotel room is ready.
Let's go.
we're going to a wedding downtown in Philadelphia, a very beautiful historic hotel. It's a black tie wedding, and all our friends are going to be there. And it's like, it's exciting. So there's that. A couple, gotta shave it off. So we do have another open house coming. We're doing it backwards because I got our run sheet late. The open house, July 22nd at 7 p.m. The Comfort Care Practitioner course. This is our homeopathy hospice. This is July 22nd and 29th. And the sign-up links are going to be in the show notes. And if you have a question you want us to answer in a future episode, leave us a comment. We do read them all. And we're always looking for, questions like, what sorts of things would you guys like us to cover? Here's what I would love feedback on from the community. Does anybody have any ideas on how we can move forward, right? So maybe I'm a little bit Pollyanna because I tend to have an optimistic streak. I feel like I don't think you can ever blame a person for their ignorance. If they haven't been taught something, you can't expect somebody to know something that they haven't been taught. And you also, if somebody has had, good results, sometimes, there's the practitioner relationship can really do a lot for people feeling like they've gotten a good result, even if they're not getting the medical differential that we would expect. How can we go about getting people back to understanding what homeopathy is, sort of what Hahnemannian homeopathy is, so that we can get the best possible results without othering? I think it's really tough because I think we're not going to be able to make systemic change unless people understand why we're saying this, because it's not like Denise and Alastair's opinion on this. We've just been following the rules. And I'm Sicilian. Rule following doesn't come naturally to me. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. Shoot. And it's right at the end. I also come by this honestly because we talked about this last night, Al, that I should talk about it. I actually, I did cease training back in 2014. I worked for a school that they wanted to break me of my Hahnemannian habit, and they sent me and they paid for me to go and do the training. And I really loved the person who was teaching it. She's great. I had a really nice time with the people there. I also, so if you're not familiar with cease training, it's a series of protocols developed to treat autism. It was developed by a guy called Tina Smits, and it is a combination of detox protocols, appreciation of the Herxheimer response. That was what really did it for me. They give what they call a constitutional remedy, and then they do a lot of orthomolecular support, so vitamins and minerals and things. And I have to say that I learned a lot from the orthomolecular part that helped me to deal with my clients. I learned a little bit more of the sort of the lay of the land there. But the detoxification things, it was primarily on vaccines and things. When I saw the cases, I was amazed. The other students were like, oh yeah, this is great. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is not great. I treat cases like this all the time without blowout Herxheimer's responses and head to toe sores and whatever, the fevers and it was just, and I could look at these cases and say, now obviously I didn't prescribe on them, so I don't know what would have happened, but the information that was presented did lead me to think about it through a single remedy perspective. I didn't feel like there was nowhere to go from a single remedy standpoint. Anyway, so I wanted to say that because I come by this honestly. I did try it because I, like everybody who feels called to support people on their healing journey, you want to make sure that you're covering all your bases. So it's not like I just said, oh no, this doesn't exist. I went, I did it. I spent however many days there learning it,
and not so much cease therapy offered anymore, huh? Seems to have come and gone, bit of a fad.
I mean, I think it's turned into these sort of detox protocols. I
Uh,
mean, that now feels lightweight compared to what I
oh,
see people doing now.
yeah. This is
Anyway,
he's heavy. Yeah. All right.
I hope, I hope that that's helpful though for people who might, be thinking that we're coming at it from a closed-minded perspective because
What
yeah,
about
I
Doc?
did. And
You,
yeah.
you must have seen this. That there's a comment from a listener, Mapco, who said something, and I just want to finish with it because it doesn't quite make a lot of sense to me. She says, or he says, unfortunately, homeopathy did not produce any results for me, despite being treated by two different doctors, both for my children and for myself. Some of my friends have had the same experience. So overall, my experience with homeopathy has been negative. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
so isn't that interesting? It's like, I wonder if, have you ever had a bad massage? Or if you've had
yeah.
a chiropractic
Remember that?
adjustment that didn't go so well? You're throwing the whole, you're
uh,
throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
I didn't take it that way. See, here's my positivity. I saw, because this was regarding episode 122, taking too many remedies. How do you know what happened? So it's possible that maybe they had been treated with all sorts of protocols and stuff. But it's
Yeah,
also,
or doctors that went to a couple of weekend workshops
yeah,
and put out the
energetic
shingle. It's
therapeutic.
like, why throw away a discipline or at least a uh
But maybe they're not. They're listening to our podcast. So maybe they still have hope and they're thinking, I really want this to work.
ah, yeah, well, no.
Kind of a Susie cream cheese.
Susie cream cheese. Now I know what that means. I never used to.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, Susie cream cheese. Let's
Um,
pull the pin. It's been spiritual. I will see you. I'll see you in 5 minutes, but I'll see
well,
you next week. Let's do it all again.
thanks everybody for listening.
All
See
right.
ya.
Ciao. Bye.
AHE is changing the face of homeopathy education by raising the bar through rigorous academics and unparalleled clinical training delivered live through the soulful use of cutting-edge technology. AHE prepares its students to become fully rounded homeopathic practitioners from anywhere in the world. Apply today at ahe.online.